Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Sunday night live stream here on the 11th house, where hopefully the best 40 people on the internet will show up. That's usually my Sunday night number. It's about 40 people, and then tomorrow on the 15 Minutes of Flame version of this broadcast. Welcome to the Sunday night live stream. Can mute that here on the 11th house, where gotta mute that. Hold on one second. The best 40 people on the internet will show up. That's usually my Sunday night number. There you go. Okay. Sorry about that. But yeah. So here we are. I was interrupted by myself. It's a weird thing. Have you ever had yourself interrupt yourself before like that? It's very unusual. But it does happen from time to time that we interrupt ourselves. And in that case, certainly I did. Anyway, yeah, so tomorrow it will morph from 40 people to probably about a whopping maybe 50 people, and then somewhere in the middle of the day or in the afternoon, maybe evening, it'll creep up to about 150, 200 people. So, but it's quality, not quantity. Am I right? I think so. Let's go over kind of what's happening in the astro news that relates to the weather. There's supposedly a really big hurricane happening in Florida. I have not seen it. I've been watching a CNN, excuse me, I have to clean my glasses. I've been watching a CNN live stream over the course of the last 20 minutes or so. The football game between the Giants and the Cowboys was terrible. I turned it off. Let's see. Yeah, that's better. So it was a really funny live stream because they were taking the live stream from CNN, and it was like a third party. You know, these people do this on YouTube. They stream the third party stuff or third party site channel streams like live media, and then they have the comments that roll and scroll down the side. I have no idea what this site was about, what this channel was about, but the people that were putting the comments up were hilarious. I mean, they were just totally hilarious. Every person, it might have been every fourth person that didn't have the similar comment or a similar comment, and it was fake news, fake rain, fake newscaster, fake tree, fake shrubbery, fake hurricane. Everything was fake. It was mind-blowing watching the comments and thinking that this is the reality that a lot of people have right now, that we are living in a time where mediated reality is like incredibly synthetic. Incredibly synthetic. So they're riffing on the fake nature or the nature of our so-called fake reality, our plastic reality. It's really fascinating. We're going to get into some of that tonight, I think, as we go through what's happening astrologically out there, as we finally move out of that shadow phase of the eclipse. But it's been a really intense and powerful phase. You know, one of the things that we talked about, or at least I've talked about in the past with an eclipse, is that when an eclipse hits an essential part of an individual's chart, like their sun or their ascendant, that essentially what's happening is that that part of the chart is being blacked out. And for a brief period of time, it doesn't exist. The self doesn't exist. The ascendant doesn't exist. And it goes into a shadow phase. And what happens is that the person comes in contact with their shadow, and to some degree maybe how quote-unquote powerless they are, or this perhaps ignites kind of an existential dilemma in the individual's life. Now, I've seen this up close and personal, and I've shared the story. It was last March. We had a solar eclipse that took place. It wasn't here in this country, but it took place on my son, my S-O-N, his son, S-U-N, and it was a very strange transformation that occurred for him during that time, because he was actually a really good baseball player and very aggressive and confident, And then this eclipse came around, and there were two things that coincided with the timing of the eclipse. One was that he had not been vaccinated until the age of, he had been vaccinated, period. Here he is, 12 years of age, and all of a sudden, you know, one of his parents, not me, decides that they want to vaccinate him. There's nothing I can do about it. I am not the custodial parent. Luckily, his mother had agreed to wait for an extended period of time. At the very least, I got the luxury and the blessing of not having him vaccinated when he was very young, which could have been quite tragic, as we've seen in many instances. But he wound up getting the MMR in 3 separate shots. And that was right before the eclipse. And then the eclipse came, and it just, I'll never forget the image of him. And this was around Mother's Day. So this was just kind of, I guess this was a little bit after the eclipse, but not much. It wasn't much after the eclipse. And he had the vaccinations kind of right around that same area in time. And he was sitting, he was at the dugout with his team. And it was a very competitive game, and the team was, they were all like crowded around sort of it was really kind of Norman Rockwell-ish, except these kids weren't Norman Rockwell kids. They were, you know, kind of, you know, edgy kids in some ways. But they were all up against the entrance to the dugout watching the game going on. And my son was all the way at the other end of the dugout. He had 1 foot out of the dugout. And it was just a really, I'd never seen anything like that before with him. So it was certainly a case where it almost felt like he was one person, and then he kind of had this phase shift into some other, you know, kind of identity in some ways. And he still plays baseball, and you know, he's still pretty good, but it was a really odd kind of moment in time, and it extended out for the next few months. It was like I didn't even really know who he was on the baseball field in some ways. You may say, well, baseball is nothing, but I watched him go through this crisis. It was a crisis of confidence and his identity with the team. It was really unusual, and you know, we're sort of through that now. Whatever he needed to integrate became integrated. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of revisit the eclipse one more time before we move into this 923 period, which is supposed to be quite biblical and revelatory, although there are people who take issue with that. So one of the things that happened during the eclipse is that it took place on Donald Trump's ascendant. We all know that. We talked about it ad infinitum, and we talked about the change that occurred, and it was all in the run-up of the eclipse. I mean, we saw a coup take place with the 3 generals and the ouster of the nationalists, Steve Bannon, Ira Cohen, Wapnick, Sebastian Gorka, all gone. They're all gone. And this was the sort of the Praetorian Guard of nationalism inside the Trump administration. And who did we see take over? Well, we saw John Kelly take over, and Mad Dog Mattis, and McMaster, and Gary Cohen, and to a lesser degree Mnuchin. But it was really those, you know, those 4 for the most part. Dina Powell, who's very much connected to McMaster, and so we saw basically a 6 days of May military coup, which we talked about. That happened. It took place. And we talked about the revolutionary aspect as well, and the revolutionary component took place as well. Just about a week, a little over a week before the eclipse. It was 12 days before the eclipse. We had Charlottesville, and we've been in revolutionary mode ever since. Now remember, these energies of the eclipse took place on Trump's ascendant, and his Mars was right there on the ascendant. So what's happening now? I mean, certainly we've had some pretty intense sunspot activity after the eclipse. We've had Hurricane Harvey and whatever Irma is at this point. I can't even begin to speculate, but I don't think it's you know, a lot of people have been moved out of their homes, and a lot of people, you know, depleted gas lines like they did here in Texas. They stormed stores and bought generators and water, and they were basically preparing for doomsday. Well, the lesson is prepare for doomsday before doomsday is at your doorstep. I mean, that's number one. But what's going to happen now? Are these people just going to be able to go back? Are they going to just like take their lives over from, you know, where they left off? Or is there going to be another part of the story that's going to evolve over the next few days and maybe even next week or so, where, you know, there's a much larger presence inside of Florida? Okay, but let's go back to Trump. The reason I brought up the story with my son is because it's worth noting now that Donald Trump has made a bold overture to the Democrats with the debt ceiling limit. Now, this was something that the Republicans were loath to raise. Now, Trump, of course, tied this to the relief funds that could be available and made for Houston, and if indeed there was a major disaster. I'm telling you right now, no matter what's going on in Florida, nothing like Houston, okay? Not even close. But I understand that he wanted to do this so he could somehow free up the money so that they could actually use that money and maybe help the local populace, run it through HUD, so that it becomes, you know, housing, urban development, blood money, and then bring in the Agenda 2030 model on steroids. Possibility. But he has been battling both Republicans and Democrats, and he decided all of a sudden that, well, he was going to go hang out with the Democrats, and he worked on the debt ceiling bill with Chuck Schumer. And, you know, you got to hand it to Trump. The guy's got a lot of, I mean, he may have small hands, but the guy's got some cojones, right? I mean, he's willing to look at sort of the cul-de-sac that he'd been working with, and now all of a sudden, you know, he's coming into he's coming into the sort of the burning fires of the left, right? You know, sort of, it's like the campfires at night. Here comes Trump walking in from the woods at night. Hey, what's going on? You know, they're all sitting around roasting marshmallows and, you know, taking shots of I don't know, Johnny Walker Red or whatever they drink out in these places. And he's making a deal with them, right? So he's recreating his identity. He's basically agreed to jettisoning, you know, the nationalists. They're gone. The globalists are essentially running the Trump White House. But I think Trump every now and then will continue to do what he does with that Sun-Uranus conjunction. He'll be unpredictable, and he'll do something that will, you know, infuriate one group, and then another group they'll say, wow, you know, it's great, thank you. Like what he did with DACA. He could have just signed off on DACA and just repealed it. It would have been very easy, but instead he gave a 6-month window, which gives the lawyers and it gives Congress plenty of time to rally and, you know, come up with a different version of DACA, another deferred kind of action plan. In that case, he's kind of, in some ways, kind of ceding to the left again. So Trump is making these interesting overtures. Now, here's what I've heard. I've heard, and I know some people that are kind of connected on the Republican tip in a very kind of close way with sort of the alt-right world, and even some of the donors and investors of that world. And what I've heard is that there's a deal taking place. I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong. But the deal is that Comey's going to get fried. And Trump is playing nice with the Democrats. And he's basically doing this kind of really soft, slow motion amendment sort of ending of DACA while the lawyers and the courts and Congress, create a runaround or a fix to it. And that's on purpose. It's not because, he has a soft spot in his heart, or maybe he's got to deal with all of his undocumented workers. I don't know. But that happened, and then we have the deal with Schumer. But I've heard that part of the deal has to do with the fact that they're going to get Comey. Like Hillary is probably, or maybe Hillary too. I don't, I've heard talk about Hillary as well, that she's part of this kind of overall deal. Now, what's happening is that the Awans are making plea deals, and we're going to talk astrology. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get your head wrapped around how he's changed or is changing. Now, you would say that somebody with a Sun-Uranus conjunction is capable of this. Of course he is. When Trump was living in New York before running for president, he was a Democrat. And he donated to all the good Democrats in New York, including Hillary Clinton, Michael Bloomberg, Chuck Schumer. He made donations, political donations to all of them. And that was his party affiliation. And he went from being a Democrat to a Republican because he had core values, and I do believe he has those core values. It's in his chart. When you've got all those planets in Cancer, the Venus, Mercury, and Saturn, those are all very nostalgic, tied to the past. The whole idea of America being a Cancerian country, Trump has those values. They're a part of who he is. So for him to run a platform on being a populist was not a lie. Did he pump it up? Of course he did. But who wouldn't? Is Trump any different than any other president? What was the last time Jesus Christ ran for president? Sananda Manuel. What was the last time that guy ran for president? Well, I'll tell you what, he hasn't. And as much as you think that Barack Obama might have been an incredibly enlightened individual, not even close. Not even anywhere close. So what we deal with these people who are running for public office is we're dealing, in many instances, with low levels of sociopathology, certainly higher levels of narcissism than just about any other occupation. And then somewhere in there is like some kind of original spark or original intent. And who knows where that comes from. It has to probably be explored and dissected in the individual chart. But it's in Trump's chart. He's got those Cancerian values. It's important to him. As long as he's on top. As long as he gets to be the big guy, the big deal, the big dude, right? The big Don with Leo on the ascendant and Marser. But he's changing. And I believe that this is partially due to the eclipse and his understanding that his sense of power and his source of power are not linked to his own party. So if he has this other party over here who might be very receptive, and by the way, if he starts to play nice with the Democrats and the progressives, they'll lighten up. I think they'll lighten up on him. Now, there are some people who think that this is just another term, another Obama term, that basically everything that Obama was doing, Trump is now going to fulfill. Maybe, possibly. But we're still, just a year into the Trump presidency. Now, people keep talking about 2020. Well, we haven't even reached 2018 yet. We've got to go through all the way through 2018. So we have a whole year of the Trump presidency. Now, generally speaking, it's that first year that defines a president. It's like, do they get their bills passed? Are their mandates met? And if they are, for the most part, then it's considered a successful presidency. Most instances, presidents, when they get to the second term, most presidents are just, they're lame ducks. Most of their work is done during the first term, believe it or not. And certainly that's what happened with Obama. So we still have a year to go. We still have a year to see what Trump is going to pull out of his hat. Now, the North Korea rhetoric has abated slightly, although Dennis Rodman has been back in the news saying that he really thinks he should go back to North Korea so he could work something out. We've done the Rodman Kim Jong-un charts, and we saw how they were a couple of misfits that kind of understood each other. It's really, really fascinating. So that's where we are, and there's a lot of rain in Florida, but it's not looking like a Category 5 hurricane. It's not there. Now, it did apparently at Category 4 cross all the way over Cuba. Yeah, we don't have any, I haven't seen any footage yet, but theoretically that was quite devastating in some ways. And, you know, we'll probably get some images from people that are there and have been there, but we'll, you know, can we trust the media's images? I don't think so. But as the storm crossed Cuba, which, by the way, got into some really weird stuff with the American embassy in Cuba. I don't know if you picked up on this, but they had to send people home from the American embassy in Cuba because they were suffering from some kind of sonic sickness. Yeah, that's right, sonic sickness, which means that the American embassy, the people in the American embassy were being hit with some kind of sonic or scalar wave that was screwing them up and making them unwell. And trust me, these things exist. They totally exist. So many years ago, back in 2000, boy, I guess it was 2007, 2008, I think it was 2008, I had an encounter with one of those devices, and it was not pretty and it wasn't fun, and it debilitated me for about 6 months. So I know they exist. I know that they are real. And now we have this storm. Now I think they got most of the people out of the consulate up. Now we have this storm, Irma, going right over Cuba. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? And I'm not saying it's a payback or retribution. But you know what's also fascinating is the idea that these storms. So, you know, on Friday's show, I was talking about this weapon that the Russians have called NMOD. Environmental modification. It's an environmental it's called NMOD for short, right? So the Russians can do their weather war. And then we have our various HARP stations, although HARP is obsolete. They can run all this stuff through Gwen towers, and they can network Gwen towers and basically do the same kind of scalar operation that HARP was providing. Although there is a HARP installation in Arecibo, Puerto Rico, which is quite near where they have the giant listening station, the giant satellite, not satellite, but observatory. So acoustic observatory in Arecibo. Anyway, could you imagine what it would be like having the United States and Russia fighting over a hurricane? I mean, that would be kind of a, you know, it's kind of like, you know, here's, you know, Russia's trying to steer it this way, US is trying to steer it this way. I mean, they got all these technologies going on, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And, you know, I'm sure it would be quite destabilizing, disturbing to the rest of the ionosphere and the rest of the ecosphere. But it's just an interesting thought, right? That there would be not only one country engaged in weather war and weather manipulation, but another country who may want to come in and, you know, be a part of the party. Now, apparently there was a green flash in Mexico just prior to the latest earthquake, which was an 8.2. And that takes us back into those days in the, like 2009, 2010, 2011, where they would have these major earthquakes, but there would be, like there was one in China. Do you remember the one in China? It was a big earthquake in China. And there was a green flash in the sky. So the green flash was indicative of some kind of massive pulsing of energy just before the earthquake happened. Well, we hadn't heard about the green flash in a while, but it came up during the discussion of the Mexico earthquake after the fact. So there's another little bit of weather modification and environmental manipulation, perhaps. I think there was a green flash in Haiti too, if I'm not mistaken, prior to that earthquake as well. So here we are. I mean, we are in some very interesting times where things are not as they seem, and many young, astute, woke people, red-pilled, crashing live streams and uttering fake every third or fourth person. well, no, it's not fake. Some other random comment is probably every fourth or fifth person. Everything else is fake. 85% of the comments ripping down those commentary boxes, scrolling one after the other, a cascade of fake. It tells you where our and you got to know it's young people, because people 50 years of age, 60 years of age, myself not included, would not be on that website banging on the fake keys. Anyway, all right. So shall we get into some astrology? Some of you are probably saying about time. Okay, here we go. Here we go. I'm going to get into the chart of the day, or the chart of the moment. Go back home here. Sometimes when I go into the chart stuff, sometimes the live stream tends to drag a little bit. If that's the case, I'm totally sorry. Look at the chart of the moment. So right now, as I speaketh, the sun is in Virgo, and it's at 16 degrees Virgo. And it is in a grand trine with the Taurus moon at 20 degrees and Pluto at 16 degrees Capricorn. So we have a grand trine going on right now, and that's coming from the earth side. From the fire side, guess what? We have a grand trine with Venus at 19 degrees Leo, Saturn at 21 degrees Sagittarius, and Uranus at 27 degrees Aries. I'm going to pull this right off of here, and I'm going to put it on the, let me see what we got there. I'm going to put it over here for your viewing pleasure. So let's do this. So y'all can check it out. Let's see what we got here. I almost got punched today. I'm serious. I'm not being overly hyperbolic. I'm going to put this up here and I'll tell you the story. You want to hear the story? It's a funny story. Here's the chart of the moment right there. We'll open it up. And we'll get into it. Let's see if I go this way, then you can get me and the chart. How's that? Here we go. Okay, so here's the punching story. All right, so I'm at a new place. It's called Woodrow's, and I kind of like it because it is. They got a lot of TVs there, and I like watching football. So having a lot of TVs and watching football, it's great because I don't have regular TV, and I don't have all the channels to choose from. So I went there today. I've been going there a little bit lately, and they also have things like shuffleboard and Golden Tee golf, and it's more participatory. Let's put it that way. So I went there and I sat down and I was hanging out at the bar, and I had just one drink. That's all I had. I had a Bloody Mary when I got there, and the rest of the time it was just iced tea lemonade. And there's this guy next to me who's bald-headed and thick, and he's with his wife, and he's very intense. And he's a Raider fan, and he's from New York. You can hear the New York in him. I'm a Raider fan, And he was very into the Raiders, and he's like a very intense guy. And I was just talking to him about. He's from New York. I mean, his name is Vinny. Found that out. He's Vinny from New York. Can you believe that? So we're talking, and we're having like this gentlemanly conversation, and we're talking about baseball players and football players, and how football players are better athletes. That's his story, and baseball, you can make more money. You don't have to be as good. I know a little bit about these things. I know about collective bargaining agreements. I know about players' rosters. I know about what it takes to become a baseball player. All the players in the minor leagues who don't make squat. Okay, so, I can't just say, yeah, you're right, yeah, because it's just not me, right? So I said to him, I said, look, there's 24 players on a professional baseball team. 24, okay? 24, that's not many. And there's about the same amount of teams in baseball as there are in football. In football, there's 52 players. And not only that, but they carry a practice squad. Now, baseball has minor leagues, and some guys never make it out of single A or double A, and they go back home and they wind up selling cars or selling insurance or doing IT or opening their own baseball academy, whatever, right? And I also know that in baseball, you have to have this contract based on the collective bargaining agreement. You can't really make any big money for like 6 years if you're a baseball player. And most of the time you spend it in the minor leagues. So we're disagreeing. We're disagreeing about who's got it better or worse or whatever, right? And so I said, hey, look, I beg to differ, but, we can agree to disagree. And I was done with him. I didn't need to talk with this guy anymore. But then he comes back in. He wants to talk some more about the whole baseball player, football player. That baseball players are just fat asses who drink and go up and throw a ball. That's that may have been the old days, but you can't do that anymore. It's too competitive. So I talked about how football players, like offensive linemen and defensive linemen, sometimes, they're very good, they're big, they're strong, they're quick, but they don't always have to be the best athletes. They have to be good in close space and have leverage and all that stuff. And then I said, well, Michael Bennett, this is the guy that plays for the Seahawks. I said, well, even Michael Bennett got taken down by a cop. And my whole point was that Michael Bennett, a football player, was taken down by a cop. Not that the cop couldn't have been like in shape or anything, right? But that Michael Bennett was supposed to be this big, fast, strong football player, and he got taken down by a cop. And all of a sudden, this guy exploded. And he says, I'm a retired New York cop, you son of a bitch. And he balls up his fist. I swear to God, I'm watching him ball up his fist next to me. And I said, well, hold on a second. I was actually on your side. I was making a comment about Michael Bennett. And it was like the weirdest moment. And I said, why don't you just chill out? It was like, it was so strict. And this was not some, this was not some fey guy. This is a guy with, intense, bald head. And probably suffering from, just extreme PTSD. And it was just like, what do you do in a moment like that, right? I mean, it was a really interesting kind of moment because this guy was really angry. And I have to say, I was like, it just went, it didn't, there are moments people have been angry and I've gotten kind of hot or like kind of weirded out, but it's like, in this moment, it wasn't like that at all. I'm like, just chill out, man. I'm on your side. We talked about Michael Bennett and finally, he was like back down and, it was very intense. Very, very intense. And I even kind of got his, I said, look, I was making a point that an NFL lineman got caught, okay? He got ran down. It's called irony, It was just so weird. And then by the end of the time he left, he shook my hand. And, this is how guys are in a lot of ways. It's like dogs. Guys are like dogs. You ever watch dogs? If you ever go to a dog park, dogs, generally speaking, if they're off a leash, most of them run around, they're okay, smell each other's, but every now and then they get into a hassle. They get into a hassle, and if you break them up, they're done. Generally speaking, they're done, right? You break them up and they're done. And maybe the next time you go back to the dog park, they're sniffing each other's butts again. Guys are like dogs that way. They're like dogs. If they're done, they're done. So I was done with it. He was done with it. We moved on. But for a brief moment, I'm sitting there, and he's like, he's got his fist. He's like, like, whoa, where is this going, man? Anyway, all right, let's get back into the chart at the moment. We got 2 grand trines happening, and we've got a lot of other action here. So we've got splits coming off the grand trine. We've got basically it's an air and fire grand trine. This is a very powerful time. Coming up on 9/11, we're going to do some 9/11 stuff tonight. We're going to look at 9/11, and we're going to get into some interesting charts. I'm going to look at the progress chart of the United States. I'm going to bring in the 9/11 chart against the United States, the progress 9/11 chart. So we're going to get into all that tonight. I got some celebrities and stuff. I'll pop up, like I normally do, and excuse me, we'll look at their charts as well. But here we are. There's the chart of the moment. 2 grand trines happening. And that's been kind of in operation for most of the day. You know, the pivotal planet here obviously is going to be the moon in Taurus. And earlier in the day was probably, you know, not quite. Let's see. So we got the moon at 20. So it was past this. It's past the sun now. So earlier in the day we had a moon sun trine, probably somewhere like around I don't know, about 4 o'clock this afternoon. I mean, maybe that's why I felt good or didn't feel like totally threatened, because, you know, Taurus moon is a peaceful moon. It is not a warring moon, not at all. Even when it's trine the sun and trine Pluto, there can be some real powerful, you know, potential for transformation and moving through emotions and, you know, not getting caught up in, you know, the fight or flight thing. It was so intense. You know, very intense. And so let me just tell you another part of the story. So you know, we moved from Houston before the flood. So, you know, what do you do here now? He goes, well, I'm in disability. I'm in retirement. He said he had injuries that came up from the job. I said, well, what do you do? He said, well, I walk the dogs, I keep the house clean, and I take her back and forth from work. And her is his wife, who's trying to be a school teacher in a town near here. And I thought, wow, that's, you know, I mean, all of a sudden now, he went from being this real intense, tough guy that wanted to knock my lights out to being like, you know, the stay-at-home husband, you know, who keeps the house clean. And I said, oh, that's great. I said, what are you going to do when she gets sick of you in a couple of years? I'm sorry, I was just, you know, that kind of devotion to a woman, man, that's really cool. I got to say that. Props to Vinny from New York. I did tell him, though, he should start his own sports bar out in the town that he lives, because there's nothing quite like that there. And I think he'd be good at it. Anyway, I got to tell you one more story. This is, okay. So last night, you know, I'm at my other place down the road, Jack Allen's. And whenever I tell somebody I'm an astrologer in Austin, I'd say 7 out of 10 times they are Christians. And then I get the weird treatment. It's like, by that time I've established that I'm like not a serial killer. So they're like, this guy might be okay. So they kind of let it go a little bit. Sometimes I will get the, you know, that kind of look, right? The disapproving look. So last night I was at Jack Allen's just doing my thing. And this woman sits down, she's got her daughters with her, and we start talking, and, you know, and her husband's kind of a big deal. He runs these, she's a Leo, and her husband's a Leo, so you got 2 Leos together. And I can't believe we've talked astrology, right? Because when I told her I was an astrologer, I got this look. And by the end of the conversation, she was laying her hands on my head. By the time she got up and went to go have dinner with her daughter, she was laying her hands on my head and giving me the Jesus prayer. That happened last night. It's a very different kind of scenario than Vinny, who wanted to knock me out. He didn't even know I was an astrologer either. Anyway, so we have this grand trine going on with Earth. Very grounded. Now, the moon's going to be moving on. You know, so by the time we get into the latter part of Monday and Tuesday, it'll be in the sign of Gemini. Very different vibe. You know, much more communicative, tricksterish, puckish. It's the nature of Gemini, correct? And it will move into sextile with some of these Leo planets that are part of that grand fire trine. But we will have, by, what is it, looks like Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday, probably by the end of Tuesday night, we'll have that moon trine to Jupiter in Gemini and Jupiter in Libra. And that'll be a very interesting trine, very expansive, kind of on the emotional side, really talkative. You know, not necessarily expansive in an effusive kind of way, but talkative. You know, like a lot of communication around how we're feeling. The challenge with that is over-intellectualizing it. You know, talking about it too much versus just actually emoting and feeling, which sometimes, hey, if we can get off our cell phones and get out of text, maybe just even talking about it in person, our emotions in person might be might be a real win in a lot of ways. What else do we have as part of this grand trine, which is very interesting? The Sun-Pluto trine. Oh, yeah. So that'll get stronger because we've got the Sun at 16 degrees and Pluto's at 17. I'll get back in the view here. So that means that by tomorrow, 9/11, it's almost 9/11 now. It's 10:40 here if you're listening on the East Coast. You're a mere 19 minutes now away from 9/11, and this will be the 16th anniversary of 9/11. And we're going to look at that again tonight. So we're going to have this Sun-Pluto trine on 9/11. You know what I hate about 9/11? I hate the bullshit history around 9/11. And you have to sit through it. It just completely and utterly sells the lie. Talk about fake. I mean, it is the linchpin of fakery. You know, there's a lot of debate now about what we should focus on in order to, you know, pull that linchpin so that the whole shit show and charade comes tumbling down. There's plenty of information out there that could give us enormous amounts of firepower to take down fake reality. That's not the issue. What the issue is validation. That's the issue. Because unless CNN or unless MSNBC or unless somebody on the left, you know, not just anybody on the left, but like legions of the left, whoever it is, whoever the authority is that comes out and rubber stamps that thing. Like if the Pope, apparently the Pope like hit his didn't he hit the deployment bag in the Pope mobile and he got a bloody nose? Didn't that happen? Anyway, let's say you had the Pope. Let's say you had the Pope. Who else would be there? Obama. Obama would have to be there. You're the Pope, Obama, forget Merkel. You couldn't put Putin in there because it'd be too tainted. Although Putin and Obama together might be interesting. So you'd have them in there. Maybe you would have Amy Schumer. Put her in there because if Amy Schumer said something to the effect that 9/11 was done by outside forces, and they were done, you know, and it wasn't the Saudis. You know, the Saudis might have been complicit, but really, what's going on here with 9/11 is it's an inside job with the United States of America and the Mossad, right? What if she said that, and what if the Pope said that, and what if Obama said that, and what if Maxine Waters said that, and then what if John McCain said that? And what if Don Lemon and Cooper Anderson, what if they all said that? Would that be validation enough? Would that be just the onslaught of validation? Who else do we need to throw in there? David Brooks? Should we throw David Brooks in there? Okay, how about David Brooks? And what if, how about John Oliver? You know, who's just, you know, completely fake anyway. Throw him in there. What about Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel? What if the Jimmys are on board? They're all part of the same press conference, right? And they all have this moment, right? This mea culpa. Oh, yeah. Oh yes. And we're sorry. We sold that to you. We all were naive. We're all under the spell and the power of forces beyond our control that threaten not only the lives of our family, but our very souls. And to cleanse these souls, we're now coming forward. Throw Ellen and Oprah in there too, just for, you know, getting that weird kind of, you know, middle-aged sort of ascent from liberated women. Would that make it happen? Would that be the validating kind of body that we need? Because I'll tell you right now, the information's out there. It's the validation that isn't. Anyway, we're coming up on 9/11 tomorrow with the Sun-Pluto trine. There's a lot of power in this, you know, and we've been going through the Sun-Pluto trine. Like we go through it when the Sun is in Taurus. We go through it when the Sun is in Virgo. We've been going through this since Pluto's been in the sign of Capricorn. It's the nature of the Earth trine. And when the Sun is in Capricorn, what do we have? We have conjunction, right? So it's not like this is anything new. However, that said, when everything now from here on out is new. And what I mean by that is we're in uncharted territory. I mean, we've never been in this place before, whatever this place is. We've never been here before, ever. So when we have transits, even the transits themselves have the potential to be new. They have the potential to bring new energy, new ideas, new presets of how we're going to relate emotionally. Okay, I've talked about this before. So we are in this post phase, this post historical phase, and where there's this collision of like pop culture and cyber distraction and this huge kind of, you know, quantum accelerator of information we're being bombarded with all the time. And we've got people who, you know, show up as fake actors, crisis situations. It's all there, right? It's all there. And some of it is visceral and real, and people get punched around and moved around with the Antifa rallies, but some of it isn't real as well. So we're in a very different place, right? This is like no other time that I've ever been alive. I don't think you can go back into the annals of human history and find another time. The only time, I've talked about this before, it comes close to the 60s. And with the 60s, there was the potential for the altering of consciousness and sort of this, you know, golden dawn that was, you know, theoretically about to break as society collapsed and we had helter-skelter and all that other crap, right? Which never happened. At least not formally. Informally, yes, it did happen. But anyway, so when we have these aspects now, the aspects are coming at us in different kinds of ways. It's just the nature. It's the nature of the aspects. What else do we have here? We've got Pluto square Jupiter. That's interesting, Pluto square Jupiter. You know, this might pertain to the Pluto-Jupiter square. Just recently, the Red Cross has assaulted Americans. Made it so easy for you to go and give $10 off your phone to the Red Cross so they can donate it to, you know, this relief effort in Houston. Well, apparently the mayor of Houston is saying that the Red Cross doesn't know when the money's going to get there. They don't know where it's going to go. And the mayor of Houston, guess what? He's calling it a fake operation because the Red Cross is not responding like the Red Cross should. Well, the Red Cross is responding how the Red Cross has responded for the last decade. Easy. And then some. They take the money and run. And there's no guarantee that the disaster funds, I think it's like 25% go to the so-called disaster. Everything else goes to the running of the organization. Well, so we got this Pluto-Jupiter square. Just be careful. You know, if the Red Cross is banging on you now for Irma, you know, be careful. You know, just watch where your money goes. Watch where you put it. You know, who's going to distribute the funds. And just make sure it's needed. It is needed in Houston. I guarantee you that. It's a mess. But, you know, we're not sure how much is needed actually in Irma. And I'm not going to say that it's not. But just beware with a Pluto-Jupiter square. You know, that's... And Jupiter's in Libra. It's like, oh yeah, let's make everything fair. Squaring Pluto with those resources. Yeah. Saturn is squaring Uranus right now. And where are we? Hold on a second. Where is it? No, it's not Uranus. I take that back. It's in a wide square with Neptune. You know, I don't know. Saturn's at 21, Neptune's at 13. It's 8 degrees, but it's moved past the orb. I guess we could still consider it kind of the last moments of that Saturn-Neptune square. Neptune's at 12. Wow, so it's even wider. Yeah, I mean, you know, we've been through the Saturn-Neptune square, and it's been a fight and a battle for the truth. You know, with Neptune and all the Neptunian lies and the Neptunian deception and, you know, getting into the Saturnian realm, companies, politics, political parties, you know, all that stuff. That's all Saturn, Sagittarius trying to find some level of righteousness, you know, in that realm. And it's hard when it's squaring Neptune because guess what happens? You know, people are losing trust and faith in the government. And I don't care whether you're on the left or the right. It's clear. This is part of the Saturn-Neptune square. And people may want to make America great again, but ask those people how much they trust John McCain or Lindsey Graham or Paul Ryan. There's no trust. There's absolutely no trust at all. So this is also part of the Saturn-Neptune square as well. It is the in a lot of ways, it could be considered sort of the, that's what I'm looking for, demoralization of the public with a Neptune-Saturn square. Saturn is also in square with the Sun, and that's going to happen, it's going to get more intense over the course of the next couple of days with the Saturn-Sun square. Of course, the Sun is in Virgo. What does Virgo want? It wants perfection. It wants facts. You know, it wants data. That's what Virgo thrives on, is data. And squaring Saturn, and well, you know, to hell with the data. You know, let's bring out the troops. No, that's not quite like that. But what you have to do personally, right, over the course of the next few days, in your own line of work, whatever you do, make sure that you got your facts straight. That's all. Get your facts straight. Make sure that you have the ability to demonstrate a point of view that is provable, solvable. Because guess what? If you don't, that Saturn's going to hammer you in Sagittarius. So take that to work. What else do we have? We've got the Jupiter-Uranus opposition, which we've been talking about. Boy, that Jupiter-Uranus opposition really has to do with this, you know, explosive environment that we've had on the social scene. Now, I don't know if you've sort of been checking things, but there's been this kind of, again, from the left, they're now starting to talk about Antifa as a gang. You know, the gang is a precursor to being a terrorist group. The left is now getting their marching orders and their talking points, and they're slowly backing away from Antifa because they realize that if they get too far into Antifa, they get too deep into them, you know what's going to happen? They're going to lose all their whatever credibility they've got left, which is just hanging by a thread, because they lost most of it during the last election. You know, they've either got to go all in balls deep, as they say, with Antifa, or they're going to have to back off. And because Trump has been playing nice, I think they're backing off. Also, did you know that Tim Kaine's son is a member of Antifa? Did you know that? It's true. The guy that ran for that weird guy. Remember Tim Kaine? Man, boy, what a creep he was. This creepy vibe. Anyway, his son. How'd you like to have you're a politician, and your son is like on the front lines of Antifa. Mars has gone into Virgo, and we have a Mars-Neptune opposition. Now that's going to get more pronounced over the course of the next few days. So we're going to run that for probably about a week with the Mars-Neptune opposition. Terrible for diets. So if you're on a diet right now, get ready. Mars-Neptune opposition, your willpower, evaporation of the will. Now Mars does have a trine going on with what else do we have? The Moon. Well, that's small. That's temporary. And then it's going to move into a kind of a deeper trine as time goes on with Pluto over the course of the next couple of weeks. And that'll be good. Mars-Pluto trine is very intense, powerful, and that's good for getting healthy and well, and you know, using that Virgo Mars to transform, you know, parts of your life. But I'd say for the next week, if you're on a diet or you're watching your health, just, you know, don't be too hard on yourself. You can fall off the wagon a little bit. From a collective standpoint, you know, I would assume that we're going to have more talk about opioids over the course of the next week, that the opioid conversation is going to continue to get louder and louder. That's my sense, okay? I saw a really interesting documentary about the drug trade in Afghanistan. It's fascinating stuff. Absolutely fascinating, because what do they grow poppies over there, right? It's the only thing they grow. They can't get them to grow anything else. They can't get them to grow cotton or, you know, or wheat, or, you know, they grow poppies. That's how these people live. And I'm not making a case for growing opium, you know, because it's a devastating kind of drug in a lot of ways. But it's tied to the economy of these families that live in really crappy situations. It's incredibly dangerous. People are getting blown up and shot all the time by warring drug lords, or a lot of the drugs go through Iran, and the Iranians don't want it in their country. Imagine that. So there are these firefights that go through like the Khyber Pass and stuff. Anyway, it's on. There's a film on, I think it's Amazon. It's all about the Afghani drug trade, and if you are interested, check it out. It's gives you some insight into who these people are at a local level, right? I mean, they're people with faces and names and families. It's really quite fascinating. Okay, so that's the chart of the moment. Shall we get rid of that chart? Let's do that. Let me see if I can get in there. Yes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is normally I go through all the different, planets and aspects, but I just kind of did it just for the moment, right? With a little bit of a interlude and anecdotal entertainment for your Sunday night. All right, so what I want to do now is get into some of these other charts. Since we're talking about 9/11, let's jump into the 9/11 stuff. Let's see what we got here. Okay. So all right. Oh, first of all, wow, do I really want to go over that? No, Florida, this is kind of interesting. Okay, I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to bring Florida's chart up because I wanted to talk about this for a little bit. Okay, so here's Florida's chart. This is from the Astro Theme version of Florida, or the Astro Theme. So here's Florida's chart. Florida's Gemini rising state, and it is a Piscean sun, Piscean sun. And what is that degree? That's 13 degrees. So Neptune, transiting Neptune, is right on the natal sun of Florida. How about that? We're transiting Neptune with all that water right on Florida's sun, right there in the 10th house. Isn't that interesting? I think so. Actually, it's in, it's in the 10th house. Not quite at the midheaven, but it's close. Yeah, it's in the 10th house. So we have Neptune literally dumping its celestial energy in water on Florida. And look what the midheaven is, right? The midheaven is Aquarius. And what is Aquarius? The water bearer. Even though it's an air sign. And look at what we have conjunct the midheaven. Neptune. Neptune conjunct the midheaven. This is a state that deals with water all the time, surrounded by water. What's also really interesting about Florida with that Neptune on the midheaven is its relationship with drugs. Specifically, cocaine, correct? Now, in the 1980s, it was the 70s, Neptune went into Sagittarius. And it was in Sagittarius for a while. And it pops, I think around 1985 or 86, it pops into Capricorn, where actually it's further than that. It's further than that. Neptune goes, it's Uranus. Yeah, so Neptune is in Sagittarius in the 1970s. And so it's going to be in Florida's 7th house. But at some point here, I'd have to get out the ephemeris. Maybe I should just do that instead of just kind of guesstimating. People appreciate that. Let's go back to the 1970s. Give me 1 second. Sometimes so we're going to go into the 9,000 year ephemeris. And we're going to go back into Neptune in Sagittarius. So let's just check in around 1974. I'm waiting. Okay. Yeah, so Neptune was in Sagittarius at 8 degrees in 1974. And both Uranus and Pluto were in the sign of Libra. So as it relates to Florida's chart, we have, okay, so we have here, we have Pluto in Aries. So during the early 70s, there was Pluto in Libra, so we have Pluto in Aries at 22, Pluto in Libra at 27. So the early 70s, there was a Pluto-Pluto opposition, probably around 1971 or so. I think it was right around then when Jim Morrison got arrested in Tampa for indecent exposure. Maybe that was that Pluto-Pluto opposition. But anyway, Neptune is really what we want to look at. Now, Neptune is at 9 degrees in 1974, and what we want to track here is the rise of cocaine in Florida in the relationship to Neptune. So let's move ahead. Let's go to, say, 1979. And by 1979, the cocaine is flowing. You know, Studio 54 was getting ready to close down, but all the cocaine that was coming through South Florida, fueling the disco era, right here, 79 is probably around really the tail end of it. So in January 79, we have Neptune at 18 degrees in Sagittarius, and that puts it clearly right on the midheaven of Florida. And it's right around this time, 1979, and I think, you know, not long after that, maybe about, 82, 83, isn't that when Miami Vice comes on TV? Right, it's right around this time. Anyway, Florida begins to gain recognition as being the state that is inundated with cocaine. So we have Neptune in Sagittarius, basically sextiling Florida's midheaven. So we've got Neptune at Sag 19, right around there, the midheaven at 20, and then we have the Neptune sextile going on because Florida's Neptune's at 24 degrees. So it reaches this peak moment, this crescendo with sort of the heavy connection with drugs and cocaine and flight. So this is what Neptune is, right? This is Neptune rules things like you know, drugs and alcohol and all those things that take us out of our body and alter our consciousness. And what's interesting is that in the sign of Sagittarius, we're talking about what? Other countries. And where was Florida getting the majority of its cocaine from? It's getting from Colombia. So that's a Sagittarian relationship. And it's funny, you know, because sometimes we think of astrology like as being, well, if something flows, it's good, right? Like if it's flowing, it's good. Oh, that's a great aspect. But sometimes drugs can be, I mean, that's a whole drug flow, right? With Neptune and Sagittarius, and it's sextiling all these planets up at the top of Florida's chart. So that's flowing, but is it a good kind of flow? You know, a lot of people made a lot of money during that time. But anyway, you know, that wasn't the only place that was dealing with huge amounts of cocaine. There's a new movie out with Tom Cruise where I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's based on the life of Barry Seal. I think it's called Made in America, and Tom Cruise plays a guy who is a pilot that's bringing cocaine into the United States for the CIA. I think it's based on Barry Seal. Anyway, that's coming out. It's going to be interesting. I actually would like to. I don't go to the movies anymore. I'd like to see that movie. Anyway, look at Florida's chart. It's so top heavy, so top heavy. And you know what Florida doesn't have? It doesn't have any Earth in the chart. The only Earth that Florida has is that moon. Now, Saturn's near the midheaven, but it's in Aquarius. So we have a state that is basically fire, water, and air. That's it. Look at the ascendant. The ascendant's Gemini, correct? Yeah. True node in Scorpio, 29 degrees. There's no ground in Florida. And the state is kind of like that. It's built on a swamp. I mean, basically, right? What's the definition of land in Florida? You know, unless it's beach, it's kind of it's an isthmus, really. And there it is in the chart. Absolutely no land except for that moon in Capricorn, which is, I don't know, I guess it's interesting. Moon in Capricorn. What degree is that? 12 degrees. So it's probably opposite what Trump's Mercury in Cancer. I think so. But it's in the 8th house. And the 8th house is other people's money. It's Capricorn. It's power. You know, I think it's probably, you know, symbolic of some kind of deep level of graft and it's square Uranus. And, you know, and Florida doesn't have that many squares in the chart. It's got that Moon Uranus square. That's it. That's a really fascinating chart. Anyway, Neptune transiting exact Florida's sun at 13 degrees. Let's remove that. Yeah. Okay, so now let's get into the 9/11 stuff. I just wanted you to see that Florida chart. It's pretty interesting. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring up a chart that has the U.S. Actually, when I wanted to do this, let's just establish. Let's just establish. Okay. All right. So here's one chart. Okay. So this is the chart for 9/11. Okay. This is 8:48 a.m. New York, New York. Let me throw in one more. I should have asked that cop about 9/11, huh? City he might have really punched me at that point. All right, hold on. Okay. All right, so now I have two charts. They're side by side, and they are on the right. One I just put up, that's the progress chart of 9/11. So to the left is the actual chart of 9/11 when it all went down. Okay, so one of the things that was really interesting during that time, obviously, was that the moon was in Gemini. And we're talking about what the Twin Towers, and a lot of the players in and around and surrounding 9/11 have very Gemini connections in a lot of ways. Okay, we have Larry Silverstein, who's the owner of the Twin Towers. He only owned them for a few months. Anyway, he's a Gemini. So we have Silverstein as a player, 9/11, Gemini. We have Moon in Gemini. We have the Twin Towers representing Gemini. We have Donald Trump, who has given lots of colorful commentary over the years, everything from Larry Silverstein being a very great friend of his to badgering one Jeb Bush during the primaries about not pushing him too far, because he'll talk about what happened on 9/11 with his brother. I mean, it was a not so very veiled threat towards George Bush. We have George Bush's father, who is also a Gemini, and this connects all the way back to the death of JFK and the JFK timeline and the assassination in Dallas, and JFK is a Gemini. And believe it or not, even Paul McCartney plays a role in this, another Gemini. I don't want to get too deep into it. But Gemini is a significant energy and entity in this chart. Now, we also have Saturn in Gemini as well. And the whole idea with the Twin Towers and the decimation of the Twin Towers, there was a lot going on there, obviously. There was, Rudy Giuliani's a Gemini too, another 9/11 player. So the whole idea, right, was to, on an occult level, was to decimate this idea of duality, of left and right and good and evil, and all these conjurings that our world has been debased and marginalized by. And then after this occult decimation of duality, out of that experience would rise a unified vision that would encompass one world, right? Which is the one world, what are they called now? Trade Tower, I don't even know if the Freedom Tower, but that's what it's like, okay, all right, we are going to deconstruct duality and we'll recreate a sense of unity and order as a result of this. And this spire, this painting, and there's all kinds of esoteric symbolism that surrounds the One World Tower. Everything from the submerged black Saturnian cube that has a mathematical relationship with Saudi Arabia and Mecca and the Kaaba, to the girders, which are basically symbols of Neptune on the. I mean, it's really just amazing, kind of the whole esoteric resurrection. But ultimately, it's about the decimation of duality, and it's within their realm because they're the ones, they're the architects of this world. So they get to destroy it as they see fit, and they get to rebuild it and renew it into their vision of what? Something that's single, right? Single and unified. Perhaps the singularity itself. You know, maybe that's part of the equation. But that's part of it. That is part of the esoteric message of what happened on 9/11. Now there's more to it than that, obviously, because 9/11 also happens to be the birthday of, guess who? Sananda Emmanuel. That's right, 9/11. It's the birthday of, you know, your buddy pal, Jesus, whom we call by different names. Anyway, but that's the birthday. So, hey, why not desecrate that birthday and recreate the world unto us, that we will own this day. And we will do it in a way where people are not even aware of it. Not even aware of it. But we're going to do it anyway, right? And we're going to take this power, we're going to usurp this power, and we're going to become the gods. You know, we're going to become the gods of the new world, because what we're going to do is we're going to decimate. We're going to decimate the world based on these two buildings and duality and that historical mythopoetic supernatural being as a result of that. And this is our time. We're basically consecrating an image and aspire to our time. And I'm talking about me, I'm talking about them. This is the whole nature of 9/11. You know, it's really interesting. I was going to put this up, but I decided not to do it. Tonight or today, or 9/11. 9/11 is the birthday, supposed birthday of Dylan Klebold. And Dylan Klebold was one of the teens that were part of the Columbine massacre. So it was Dylan Klebold and Ryan Harris. And very interesting. You know, look, if there is a conspiracy theory out there about something, you'll find information. Like, you will find an alternative explanation for something on the internet. And one of the interesting ones, which I wasn't going to pursue tonight, but I'll tell you about it. But one of the interesting sorts of theories is that Dylan Klebold and Ryan Harris, the two supposed masterminds behind the Trenchcoat Mafia, are actually Matt Stone and Trey Parker from whatchamacallit, the animators, Team America and Story of Mormon and South Park. Thank you, South Park. It's interesting. You look at the pictures, maybe, and you know, did anybody die at Columbine? It's hard to say. You know, this is before we had the ability to really go in and dissect this stuff in real time. But I'll tell you what, one of the things you need to know about Columbine is that the FBI and all the response team, they were already there before the event happened. They were already there. So part of what might have occurred, just thought, is that Columbine could have been Sandy Hook 1.0. It's just a thought. If you look at the footage, I think it's getting harder and harder to find. It's a memory hole stuff now. If you look at the footage, there's no sense of urgency with the rescue crew, the first responders. No sense of urgency. And there's really one thing that's very conspicuously lacking in the whole thing. That's blood. You don't see a whole lot of blood at Columbine. So there are people that have crawled down that rabbit hole. But it's fascinating that Dylan Klebold is born on 9/11, and then they decide to stage their event, their Columbine event, on 4/20. So he was born on 9/11 and died on 4/20. Talk about occult significance. Okay, so Saturn in the 9/11 chart is in Gemini. Right, so Saturn represents what? Represents the hierarchy, represents the world. It represents governments and corporations and Baphomet, right? This is the representation of Saturn. We all have it. It's in our lives, in our chart. We have to deal with it. And here in Gemini, it's basically Saturn is Lord over Gemini in this moment. It's Lord over duality. And what is Saturn doing? It's opposing Pluto. So here we have this whole notion of desecration, destruction, and transformation. Now, out of this, we have Mercury on the ascendant in Libra, which, technically speaking, is not a bad. It's not a bad aspect. It's it's balanced. It's Libran. It's peaceful. And what did America have at that time for roughly about 8 months? Sympathy. Sympathy. It's like, oh my God, look what happened to the Americans. It's terrible. It's terrible. The world felt bad for us. The world didn't really know what the hell was going on, but the world felt bad for us. And that's Mercury in Libra on the ascendant. Now, Mercury is trining Saturn, okay, carrying out a plan, but it's also in square with Jupiter, which is conflating in some ways sort of the information, how the entire event is going to be shared. And you notice it, like, it's right in the moment too. Like, here's a very immediate kind of, Mercury on the ascendant sort of moment. Like, just moments after 9/11 happened, there's that guy on the street, and he's interviewed, and he's got the whole thing nailed. He's got all the information. He's got who was on the plane. I mean, he's just a guy on the street, right? Well, he's not a guy in the street. He was a news producer, and that guy has shown up at other events. But that's like Mercury on the ascendant. And he's like right there, boom, there's the mic, and he's basically laying out, oh my God, this is what happened. That's the first person we hear about 9/11. And clearly, he's a plant. That's Mercury on the ascendant. And the square to Jupiter, which is in Cancer, the United States' sign, is to some degree playing upon that expansive Cancerian nature, or at least the nature of Cancer that's expansive with Jupiter near the midheaven. So could it be representative manipulation? Maybe. Uranus is in opposition to Venus in this chart. And Uranus is in Aquarius, which is disruptive and destructive, right? Uranus in Aquarius, it's in its own sign. And the opposition to Venus, Venus in Leo, is, Venus in Leo is fixed. So we have a fixed kind of idea about how to relate, maybe just prior to that event. Like there's a before and after, an AC and a BC with 9/11. And Uranus kind of destroys that moment forever, right? It's destructive. And we have the destructive force of Mars on the south node in Capricorn. That's really interesting. And that's pretty early on, right? That's it's like Mars is at 1 degree. I wonder if it was like when Pluto went into Capricorn and it was on that Mars and it was on that south node. So it was around isn't this interesting? Okay, so let's back this truck up a little bit. Pluto would have been on the natal Mars and south node right around the same time that we had the financial crisis. Okay? So, let's just put these two things together. Let's live in an alternate reality for just a moment. if we did not have the final financial crisis, which may in some ways have been precipitated by 9/11, if we did not have the financial crisis and it taking all of our energy and all of our attention, could that Pluto transit of Mars in the South Node at the time, right, at that time, which was around 2009, could that have opened the doors to 9/11? Could we have actually exposed the elite with that South Node in Capricorn? It's quite possible. Well, guess what? We're going to have Saturn coming into Capricorn. Saturn has not been in Capricorn since when? Since 1989, 91, right? So we're going to have Saturn on that Mars and on that South Node at the beginning of the year. Now, is that going to blow 9/11 open? I don't know. Possibly. No, I don't think it will. I don't think it will. I think 9/11, unless of course we have, teen confirmation, which I was talking about earlier. I don't think it's going to be solved. I don't think it's going to be resurrected. However, that said, could we have another crisis when Saturn goes into Capricorn, just in case these people are charting and understanding the nature and timing of astrology? Is that possible? Could we have kind of another version of what happened in 2009 when Pluto crossed that Mars and South Node in Capricorn? Saturn transiting it. It's possible. It's possible. So we're going to have that Saturn transit opposing the true node in Cancer. It could be very interesting. It could be very interesting come December when Saturn makes its transition. All right, let's go over to the progress chart. Now, it may look the same, but it's not really. The rising sign now is at the end of Libra, and Mercury is right there at, 28. So progress Mercury is at 28 Libra. That's interesting. Very interesting. Wondering if we get to the progressed rising sign of Scorpio and Mercury goes into progressed Scorpio, maybe that would be a time of revelation as well. That'd be about 2 years from now. So from the transit of Saturn, that would be kind of at the bottom of the chart, at the bottom of the transiting the 9/11 chart, right on the IC opposing the midheaven. So it'd be right around that time. That's actually a very interesting time in the progress chart because Scorpio is the protector and the unveiler of secrets, and Mercury is the communicator and the sharer of secrets through Scorpio on the ascendant. That's a very interesting transit with the progressed ascendant from the event. The progressed Sun is in Libra at 12, so it's gone from Virgo to Libra, and it's in the 12th house. Now the Sun was right there in the original chart at the end of the 11th house and going into the 12th house, squaring Pluto and also in square with the Moon and Saturn. So the Sun was really stressed in a lot of ways, and it was hidden. So in other words, it was occulted in the 12th house. So the motivation behind 9/11 and the sort of the rabbit hole is deep, right? It's really deep. It's 12th house Sun. It's still deep, but it's in Libra, and the Sun is at 4 Libra. So we're not going to get any revelation from Jupiter expansion. We're not going to get revelation from transiting Uranus opposing. That's long past and gone. So that's not going to happen. But we also have a new midheaven, which is 1 Leo instead of 16 Cancer. So it's 1 Leo on the midheaven. And guess whose sun, or well, it's not his sun, is Mars. His Mars in the 10th house of the 9/11 chart, and that's Donald Trump. In the progress chart. In the old chart, in your old chart, his Mars at, was it 26 degrees? 26 degrees. That would have been in the 11th house. Here it's in the 10th house. Interesting. The moon has gone from Cancer conjunct the true node to being an Aquarian moon and conjuncting Neptune with an inconjunct to Venus. And that's down in the 4th chart, or 4th house of the chart. You know, what does that mean? It means that perhaps now, where we are in post 9/11 America, we're living in a very Aquarian kind of 4th house with Neptune, Moon, Uranus, and well, there's Black Moon Lilith over there in Pisces. The Moon and Neptune are quite nebulous and psychic to some degree, and there's a square which is interesting looks like it's a square to the ascendant. Now, when Mercury eventually goes into Scorpio, it's going to square that Neptune, that natal Neptune. When progressed Mercury goes into Scorpio, it's going to square the progressed Neptune, and ultimately it'll square the natal Neptune, which is not that far off. That should be an interesting time. Okay, so I'm going to go on record 2 years out from now, when the progressed ascendant, progressed Mercury from the 9/11 chart move into Scorpio, and Saturn is going to be on the 4th house cusp of the event chart of 9/11. That's going to be a critical time. 2 years out from now. 2 years out. All right. So let's get rid of this. Remove. And remove. How's everybody doing out there? Are we having fun yet? Okay, so I wanted to do, did I want to do Trump's chart with 9/11? I don't know. He knows where those bodies are buried. He totally knows. He's bullshitting everybody about the Arabs. He knows. Let's get into some celebrity charts. Let's do a few of these. Just a couple, and we can round it off for tonight. Okay, what do I want? Okay, I'm just going to do one celebrity chart tonight. And it's this guy. Hold on. Anybody know who that is? If you could guess his rising sign, what would you say his rising sign is? You can't go online and look it up. I'm not going to go into the chat room either, I'm sorry. Because when I do, it screws up the stream. So, that is Brian De Palma. Brian De Palma, the film director. And he's a Pisces rising. He's got those watercolory Pisces rising eyes, doesn't he? Those might be contacts, but I don't think they are. Anyway, Brian De Palma, the film director. I want to show you his chart. Now, his birthday is on 9/11, so that's tomorrow. So let's bring this up. I'm going to show you his chart. Fascinating chart. Here's Brian De Palma's chart. Check that out. Check that out. Have you ever seen a chart like that? There's his Pisces ascendant at 14 degrees. And this guy's got a grand trine. And he's got the Pluto-Venus conjunction, which is obsession. It's obsession. Pluto-Venus conjunction, and then opposite the moon. Now, what's interesting is that that moon is late degree Capricorn, and Venus Pluto are in early degree Leo. Okay. Now, here's what's fascinating. Now, there are two aspects to the father in the chart. it's Saturn and the Sun. And occasionally, because it's the Sun, we would associate the Sun with Leo. All right. His father was a serial philanderer. His father was a very, and he talks about this, he was a very respected surgeon in Philadelphia. And his father had affairs, so Brian De Palma was obsessed with his father's affairs. And he followed his father and would stake him out all over the place until one day he lost it and he broke in on his father in a hotel room with a woman, and De Palma had a knife and was threatening to kill him. This is when he's a teenager. So what's really fascinating is when you watch De Palma's films, there's a lot of voyeurism, you know, in those films. And because, well, people, and rightfully so, link him to Hitchcock cinematically. And Pisces on the ascendant is a very creative ascendant, right? Especially for filmmaking. But his, I believe, deeper psychological motivation for, I mean, yes, did he lift from Hitchcock movies? Of course he did. But there was something deeper going on in Brian De Palma. And it was this obsession with his father and his father's affairs, that Venus-Pluto conjunction. And then, you know, there's the moon opposite Pluto. In many cases also, this is weird. It's like, it's sort of inverted in some ways. You know, moon is the mother, but Capricorn's the father. And, you know, in the chart, I mean, it's very interesting. Very, very interesting. And he's only got an opposition. Everything else is just one big grand trine. And De Palma's been very successful. And if you look at all those Virgo planets over on the right side of his chart in the seventh house, you know, he's been called many things. He's been called perfectionist and taskmaster. And, you know, when he's the type of guy that when he's like James Cameron. When he's on a set, I'm not sure De Palma's doing much directing now, but when he's on a set, he knows everything. He knows every scene. He knows where the actors are supposed to be, all the blocking. He knows the equipment. He knows the latest technology. He knows the lighting angle. I mean, he's not dependent upon. He's not a consensus director, and you can see all that attention to detail with all those planets in Virgo, and then he's got all those planets in Taurus, which gives him some interesting trines. But this guy he's solid. This is nothing but earth. No air. Well, he's got the true node in Libra. He's got a little bit of fire, but no water, except for that ascendant, Pisces ascendant. Is that a fascinating chart? Absolutely, utterly fascinating. He had 2 marriages. I have 3, I think two marriages. But really, the thing that really changed Brian De Palma's life was on November 22nd, 1963, he heard about Kennedy's assassination. And that changed his life because there is a dripping cynicism in De Palma's cinematic work from that point forward. And he was with his girlfriend at the time, who is a woman by the name of Jill Clayburgh, who would later become a pretty well-known actress in the 1970s. So they were boyfriend-girlfriend. And he made his ascent to film quite quickly. You know, he did not have to struggle a lot, whether it was writing or directing. And, you know, he was friends with people like Al Pacino and Marty Scorsese and De Niro and all those New York people. So he didn't, Brian De Palma never really struggled. And, you know, when he hit the big time, he hit the big time in a very big way. Carrie was Brian De Palma's breakthrough film. Although he did a movie called The Phantom of the Paradise, which is one of my favorite cult movies of all time. It stars Paul Williams. It's a takeoff on the Phantom of the Opera. But there's also some very interesting things in there around rock and roll and blood sacrifice and Faust and the selling of one's soul. So De Palma had some inside info. Put it that way. Interesting chart. I would say a very good filmmaker. Extremely good filmmaker. he did The Untouchables. Remember that? And his big star in The Untouchables was, well, Kevin Costner was the star playing Elliot Ness, but the guy who really stole the show was who? It was Sean Connery. And Sean Connery is a Virgo. So there he is over in the 7th house of the chart working with a Virgo. Anyway, I just wanted to show you one of the most unusual charts I've ever seen. Earth heavy, but pointed and focused in that grand trine, in that very intense opposition. You know, when we have charts like this, and people go through, say, like for instance, where's his sun? Like when Neptune opposes his sun in about 5 years, that's going to be an intense time for him. Very intense time. Right now, Uranus is squaring his moon. So I would say that also now could be a very difficult time for him emotionally. You know, especially with his moon in Capricorn. He might feel extremely old, or he may want to recreate himself and try to feel less old and more exuberant, experimental, and young again. So when we get into transits in a chart like this, they can be very powerful and not always easy. If somebody's had a good go of it, or things have always flowed for them, and these transits can come in and just really knock him on his butt. Saturn's right on his midheaven right now. I wonder if he's going to launch another film. I wonder if he's got another project in the works. Because maybe he's going to give it one more go with the Saturn transit of the 10th house. I hope so. I like De Palma. I actually think he's a really good filmmaker. All right, let's remove this. Interesting chart, huh? And let's move that. There you go. And then here I am. So why don't we wrap this baby up tonight? Let me go into the live streams to see who's there. Is there anybody chatting? Okay, 16. We've got Daniel there. Hi, Daniel. There's Jerry. There's Jerry, and we have Ariel Sofa Spoons, and who else? There's Sally. Hi, Sally. There we go. And there's Melody Scott Zindel. Haven't seen her in a while. Porcelain Bus. Thank you, mate. May you all be safe and well. Hello, Porcelain Bus. And let's see, my friend evacuated Fort Myers, Averill Sofa. He really just had a couple of leaks in his roof and a tree down. Yep, okay. All right, well, thank you everybody for checking in tonight and being a part of the live stream. 41 people. We hit that 40 mark every week. It's the best 40 people on the internet at 10 o'clock on Sunday. All right, love you all, and take good care of yourselves, and use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step when it's possible. I'll be in Houston this coming week on Saturday and Sunday at New Paracon, and I'll be doing some readings and giving a talk down there about Uranus and Taurus and AI and Chiron in Aries, and the new masculine, and the anima and the animus, and sort of the healing of war and the war wounded, which I think are, we're more than war weary on this planet. Anyway, I'll be down there, and we'll be talking about those topics, and of course I'll be on the stream tomorrow, 15 minutes of flame. So that's it. Have a great week. If you're interested in a reading with me, you can go to my website, robertphoenix.com. I also have a 16-hour course in astrology called the 11th House Academy. It's got 16 hours worth of video and lab work and charts, and I think, some of these courses on the internet will cost you upwards of, I've seen them for upwards of $3,000. My course is actually very affordable. You can find out more about that on my site. And that's it. All right. So use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step in what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix, and